Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Genesis, the 14th chapter. Now, as we went through in the 13th chapter, pretty much dealing with Abraham and Lot's separation, as they decided to dwell in separate areas, considering their wealth, cattle and oxen and sheep and so on, was getting too much for them to be, dwelling so close to each other. So this is Genesis 14:1. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedar-laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. And these seem to be kings of the east from Israel, or from the land of Canaan, and looking like how in more modern times you had the Nebuchadnezzar, which was like king of Babylon, for example, who had dominion over the east and even the west, right? The empire, and then same as when the Assyrians were ruling and so on. So it seems these kings used to be had a great dominion in the region of the known world at this time. And so all these kings, as it says, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea, and the vale meaning the valley of Siddim, which is that, once again, the region or the area by the Salt Sea. So I found a close approximation here of the map. And the Salt Sea is also known as the Dead Sea. So that low region, right, because it was of a lower altitude, the plains area would be the vale or valley of Siddim. And so ultimately they engaged in war over there. 12 years they served Kedar-laomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So now, if Kedar-laomer was king of Elam, which is in the east, how is it that these kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, and the rest of the cities there served him? Once again, he had to have had dominion extending all the way over into those areas as well. And so they rebelled, as it says, in the 13th year. And in the 14th year came Kedar-laomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Enims in Shaveh Kiriathaim. And so that's why this has numbers next to it. These are like approximately the locations where it is that these kings that came smote these inhabitants. And so that first region, Ashtaroth, just here. I wonder if I can zoom in on this. No, wow, this is nice. Wow, damn, should have found this earlier. She. Anyway, here we go. So you have Ashtaroth over here, and then it mentioned. Let's move this next to it here, and then it mentioned the Zuzims in Ham, and the Imims in Shaveh Kiriathaim. So I believe that might have been around here before ultimately going down to El Paran. So likely around this area. And the Horites in Mount Seir onto El Paran, which is by the wilderness, all right, which is right around here. See Mount Seir as they have here, and El Paran over here, and the wilderness of Paran. Because Mount Seir originally was dwelt in by the Horites, who were basically like the original inhabitants of the region. which is by the wilderness, and they returned and came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites. And so when you look at it here, I think that's around this region right here. Now, just for some clarity, when it mentions here the Amalekites that we know descend from Esau, Edom, were not in existence at this time. But what this was using the modern inhabitants of the land to describe the region. Okay, so it's kind of like somebody telling you about something that happened historically. To say something, for example, like you had Indo-Europeans, or you had what do they call them, the Scythians, who ended up settling around what you know as Russia today, okay, or around where Russia is today. So when we describe even things like Asia Minor, or we describe certain events that took place in certain regions, we will use modern day inhabitants or names to ascribe to that place, so you know what we're talking about, even though we're speaking historically, right? So if we're saying, for example, oh, if a nation from the west, right, crossed the Aegean and was coming into the east to come to Jerusalem, they went through modern day Turkey, right, and then through Syria and so on and so forth. At the time when that event was happening, it wasn't called Turkey, but you would use that name because the people at this time would know what landmass you're referring to. So when it says they smote all the country of the Amalekites, it's saying they smote the region where the Amalekites dwell today. And today being the day of the time of when this was scribed down. And also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. And let me see if it lists that in there. Okay, so that's likely around this area. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. So that's Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, 5 kings. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations. And that's likely, once again, that was a title, but he likely was a ruler of a conglomerate of different nations of the east. And Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. So you had 4 kings of the east that came to war with the 5 kings of the cities of Sodom and the neighboring, cities that we just read here. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, which is like a pitch, or let me see, I think it's pitch or like tar or something like that. Yeah, let's look in here. I think this is the word for slime pit. Yeah, slime pits, but they have it here as, oh well. There we go. This is the actual word for it. Chamar, which is slime, pitch, asphalt, bitumen. And this is likely saying like that there was a great source of that substance within that region. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, so they were beat and they were defeated and fell there. A good portion of them, were defeated over there, their men or armies, that is. And they that remained, so those that survived, fled to the mountains. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, being the kings of the east, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, so Lot's Abram's nephew, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And remember, Lot had, wealth. So they ended up taking him as well as captive, and obviously those that were with him and their goods. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, and being one of Lot's men that escaped, and came and informed Abram, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Anir, and these were confederate with Abram. So the region where Abram was dwelling at, right, was basically a region owned by Mamre, which was an Amorite, and his brothers Eshcol and Anir were allies with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, being Lot that is, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them on to Dan. So it goes to show you that Abram wasn't like you know, a light man. It wasn't just like him and maybe like 2 or 3 servants in his house. Because if you can amass 318 trained servants, that wasn't no joke. So these were warriors. And as it says, they pursued them onto Dan. So as you can see the red here from Abraham, he basically, pursued the armies of the kings of the east and caught them at Dan. Because remember, they were traveling back now with all these spoils. And so it's not like they were going to do a day trip. It doesn't take one day to get to where they came from Israel or from the land of Canaan at this point. So he ends up intercepting and catching them here at Dan, likely while they were resting. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night. See, so they had probably set up a camp, and once again were taking their rest over there before they continued their journey. And so Abraham ambushes them. He splits up his servants into two. As it says, he divided himself against them, and they came from different sides and smote them, being the armies of the kings of the east, and pursued them on to Hobah. So as they started to flee, he said, "Oh no, you don't." And he chased them up north around that area. I think this is where they placed that Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. Yep. So if you have Damascus right around here, that will be on the left side of it. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedar-laomer, and of the kings that were with him, in the valley of Shaveh, which is in the king's dale. So, remember that they had also lost goods, right? So they were happy and glad to meet Abraham. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. Now, Melchizedek, right, we know is Yahushai, which even Paul confirms. So Yahushai, the spirit of Yahushai came on the earth at that time as Melchizedek. And as Paul mentions, he didn't have a father or mother, right? He wasn't like born, of man and woman. He just appeared. Let's go to that. I think it's Hebrews 7. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, just maybe the first few verses. You can read the rest of the chapter at your own leisure. So this is Hebrews 7:1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, otherwise known as tithe. First being by interpretation, being Melchizedek, that is. First being by interpretation, king of righteousness, because that's what the name Melchizedek means. In the Hebrew is Malak Tazadak. Malak meaning king, Tazadak meaning righteousness. So by interpretation, king of righteousness. And after that, also king of Salem, because he was also the king of Salem, which is king of peace. That's what Salem, I believe in the Hebrew, should be Shalom or Shalom, depending on the spelling they have used for it. Yeah. So if you join these two, that would be Shalom, which is peace, or Shalomah. Yeah, maybe it's Shalom. So in any case, it says here, right, without father, without mother, without descendant, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. So he was just there, all right, playing that role of a priest at that time, not being born of a man or a woman, or not having any descendants. And when you look up Salem, most sources point to this being Jerusalem. Yeah, I think even Josephus mentions that. And also when you go to the book of, no, it's in the book of Psalms. Yeah, 76 and 2. In Salem also is his tabernacle and his dwelling place in Zion. And this is something, common in the in the ancient world, the speech of saying two things in different ways. The same thing, let me say that, the same thing in two different ways, or in different ways. So to say in Salem is his tabernacle and his dwelling place in Zion, your dwelling place is where your tabernacle is, right? That's where you dwell. And when you look up Zion, it's, another way of referring to Jerusalem, or another name for Jerusalem, right? Even though it is a Tazayawan, right, which is a monument, as it says here, it's another name for Jerusalem, especially in the prophetic books. So if his dwelling place is Salem, or his tabernacle is Salem, and his dwelling place is Zion, that hints at that Salem being one and the same with Zion here. In any case, Melchizedek, which was a priest of Salem, king of Salem, priest of the Most High at this time, came and blessed. It says he brought forth bread and wine. Now, what's interesting about this and kind of spiritual is that Melchizedek being Yahushai, when Yahushai actually came on on the earth as the Messiah, as Yahushai, during the Passover, he told his disciples, right, to eat the bread because it represented his body, right, and then the blood, or the wine, which represented the blood, which was his blood that was shed, right, for them, right, the blood of the New Testament. So it's just interesting that I found that he brought those things like bread and wine to Abraham when he came to meet him. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram uh, of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand." And he gave him tithes of all. This is Abram gave tithes um, to Melchizedek, because remember, he was still a priest. And that's even interesting here. He was a king and a priest. But he was still a priest. And that also goes to show you that back then they had the laws, because how would Abram have known to pay tithes to Melchizedek? How would that have been a thing, right? But he did it, which Paul even references or mentions in Hebrews the 7th chapter. And a tithe is a tenth of all the substance. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, "Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself." So, being that Abram had recovered all the spoils, the king of Sodom is saying, "You just return to me those that were taken captive of mine, and you can have the spoil, the goods, and so on and so forth." And Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God," i.e., like an oath, "the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet," which is another way of saying, so much as I won't touch so much as even a tiny thread of your stuff, "and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." So I don't want you to come in the future, and basically try to say, "Oh, it's because of me that Abram is rich and successful and so on. In fact, I'm the one who gave him such and such when he went to spoil the kings of the east and so on." So he didn't want them to have any occasion to make it seem as though he was in their debt or anything of that sort, save only that which the young men have eaten. So, in terms of whatever spoils you're telling me to take, with the exception of what the young men, the servants of his house, had eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So he's saying, with the exception of my servants and the stuff that they ate, and the portion or the spoil that should be given to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, because they were allies with Abram that went with him. With the exception of that, Abram himself wouldn't take any of the spoils that belonged to the king of Sodom. And that brings us to the end of the book of Genesis, the 14th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.